Welcome to Canada, people, where the government has the power to coerce you to submit to medical procedures, but does not have the duty of care to make sure that those medical procedures won't kill you. Viva Fry, former Montreal litigator turned current Florida rumbler, not in Florida and not in my car because I am in DC, the heart of the beast, people. Because as of the time of shooting this vlog, tomorrow I will be meeting with members of the cabinet of the Trump administration as part of a media row where I'm going to get to ask them questions, and if I get to ask RFK Jr. a question, it's going to have a little something to do with the subject of this vlog. For those of you who have been around the channel for long enough, you are familiar with the story of Dan Hartman, the father of the late Sean Hartman, a 17-year-old boy who died 33 days after taking the Pfizer jab. I've had him on the channel many times. He's explained his entire story. He was suing both Pfizer and the Canadian government for malfeasance, among other charges. And today he had his lawsuit against the government of Canada struck because the government of Canada owes no duty of care to its citizens. But if you're new to the channel and you don't know Dan Hartman's story, it's an absolutely tragic story of heartbreak. For those of you who might need a refresher, his son, Sean Hartman, died 33 days after taking the first COVID jab. He was 17 years young.
He was the reason I woke up every morning. He was the reason I went to work. I've been a truck driver for 18 years, and I used to love my job. And now I hate going. I don't even care anymore. Sean was so special. It's so hard to describe. He wasn't like other kids. He was a shy boy, but such a good heart. He wouldn't have hurt anybody. And he was my only son. And he was my reason, my love. And now he's gone. I believe they took him from me. I believe my son was murdered.
But it's not just the case that Sean Hartman died suddenly in his sleep 33 days after taking the first Pfizer COVID jab. He was actually hospitalized shortly after having taken the COVID jab. He went to see a doctor. He had brown rings under his eyes. He was vomiting, had skin rashes. The doctor failed to do a D-dimer test and a troponin test. Instead gave the kid aspirin, sent him home, and 33 days later he was dead. For those of you who may not know the purpose of the D-dimer or troponin test, just a brief AI overview. Troponin levels in a blood test measure the amount of the protein troponin, specifically troponin I-CTNL or troponin T-CTNT, released from damaged heart muscle, indicating potential heart damage or a heart attack. As for D-dimer, a D-dimer test measures the levels of a protein fragment D-dimer in the blood, which is released when a blood clot breaks down, helping to assess for blood clotting disorders and monitor treatment effectiveness. Why do I mention these two failed tests in particular? Well, it seems that the doctor who treated Sean Hartman when he was hospitalized shortly after the jab failed or neglected to do both of these tests. Both of these tests are useful in determining heart damage that results from a COVID jab, even though the doctor knew that Sean Hartman had recently had the COVID jab, and Dan Hartman actually filed a complaint or tried to take that doctor to court, and Dan Hartman's case against that doctor was dismissed, so Dan couldn't go after the doctor who failed to adequately treat his kid. After the death of Sean, Dan also filed a claim with the VISP, the Vaccine Injury Support Program in Canada. His claim was dismissed, I think, within a month because they said he failed to provide adequate evidence that his son died as a result of the jab. That is currently under appeal, given the fact that they got new evidence indicating that there were high levels of spike protein in the adrenal glands of Sean Hartman, but that claim was dismissed, so he can't even get compensated under the VISP. So Dan Hartman files a claim against both Pfizer and the government of Canada, and by the way, he's not the only Canadian doing this. Kayla Pollock is also suing Moderna and the government of Canada for similar reasons. I expect her case, at least against the government of Canada, to get tossed for similar reasons, but Dan Hartman decides to file a claim against Pfizer and the government of Canada, and today a judge dismissed the claim against the government of Canada, saying it has no reasonable chances of success and that the government of Canada owes no duty of care to its private citizens. People, one thing is for certain, the globalists will never stop. Now they are pushing airborne vaccines. No needles, no permission, just exposure. The last administration quietly funded grants for aerosol vaccines, a delivery system that could infect us without consent. Just watch this.
So we started pulling grants and we could see that there was funding going to aerosolized COVID vaccines. But that wasn't the most shocking discovery that we made. This is what led us to the discovery that our government's funding research on transmissible vaccines or self-spreading vaccines. They're developing vaccines that would essentially act like a live virus where it could basically replicate itself into new hosts.
Millions were forced into the mRNA psyop, and cases of myocarditis, blood clots, and immune damage have skyrocketed. 8 states are in the process of banning these shots. The Trump administration needs to make sure that this tyranny hasn't been released on the general public. Dr. Peter McCullough and the Wellness Company created the ultimate spike detox with 4 times the nattokinase plus bromelain, curcumin to help break down spike proteins and support your body's natural recovery. Experience the only formula approved and used by the Dr. Peter McCullough, a top cardiologist who risked it all to fight for us. Head over to twc.health/Viva. Use my promo code for the discount. You will get a great discount plus free shipping. Again, that is twc.health/Viva. And now back to the vlog. So Dan Hartman cannot sue the doctor. He can't get compensation under the VISP, and now a court says he can't get compensation from the government, and here's how it's being reported in the news today, and I've got confirmation from the lawyer as to the details of the dismissal of this case. Wait until you hear this. From the Canadian Independent at Can Independent, they also broke the Kayla Pollock story and went into detail for her case. Lawsuit against the Canadian government over teen's sudden death following Pfizer COVID-19 jab, I refuse to call it the V word, dismissed by Ontario judge. An Ontario judge has dismissed a lawsuit filed by Dan Hartman against the Attorney General of Canada, Health Canada, and former Canadian Health Minister Patty Hajdu for malfeasance in public office, deceit, fraud, and negligence over the sudden 2021 death of his 17-year-old son, Sean Hartman, who was found dead on the floor beside his bed just over a month after receiving a Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 jab. In a ruling from the Ontario Superior Court, Justice S. Antoniani struck down the case without leave to amend, finding that it had no reasonable prospect of success. The court determined that the government did not owe a private duty of care to Sean Hartman and that public health decisions, including vaccine approval and promotion, were core policy matters shielded from liability. Now, just a small legalese here. Struck down without leave to amend means that they don't even give the chance to the plaintiff to amend their allegations, to add allegations, to make them stronger. They don't even give them the permission, the authorization, the freedom to do that. They strike down the case, do not give him permission to amend. That case is tossed as relates to the government. This judge out of Canada just basically said the government can coerce you to submit yourself to medical procedures while telling you that those medical procedures are safe and effective, but they owe you no duty of care to ensure that what they're telling you is truthful, accurate, and based in science. Your kid dies and you have no claim against the government because the government has total immunity for what are policy decisions. They lied to you, they lied to your face. They told you things that they had no basis to tell you. In fact, they knew they were false or at the very least unproven when they told it to you, but they told it to you nonetheless, and too bad, so sad if you suffered any negative health consequences as a result. A government that can coerce you with immunity is not a democracy, it is an absolute egregious tyranny. Later on from the Post, Dan Hartman initially filed a claim with the Canadian government's Vaccine Injury Support Program, VISP, but it was denied within a month due to what the government called insufficient evidence. He has since appealed, providing Dr. Cole's pathology report, but has yet to receive a response. In his lawsuit against the government, Hartman alleged that Health Canada and the Minister of Health made false and misleading representations about the vaccine's safety and efficacy, failed to assess and monitor risks in accordance with their own mandate, and did not properly warn the public about potential adverse effects, including death. The claim argued that these actions created a relationship of proximity between the government and vaccine recipients, giving rise to a duty of care. Quote, the representations made by the defendants here were the expressions of core policy decisions made in an effort to protect the general Canadian public during a pandemic, end quote, the judge ruled. Remember when they told you it prevented transmission? It was a lie because they had never even tested it for transmission. Remember when they told you it was safe and effective? It was a lie because they didn't even have the data to come to that conclusion, but they get total immunity because it was in response to a public pandemic, so they could do and say whatever they want with total immunity.
Regarding the question around, did we know about stopping immunisation before it's entered the market? No. We had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market.
But the saving grace, at the very least, Dan's lawsuit against Pfizer can continue for now. We'll see what happens with that, but this news is absolutely outrageous, and it highlights the fact that the government is no longer a government. It is an absolute tyrannical force that can get away with literally what some people rightly believe to be murder. From what I understand, Hartman is going to appeal, and that is not going to be free. If you want to support his cause, there's a give, send, go in the pinned comment. But that is the vlog. This is the absolute state of Canada. It is not in a good state, and hopefully I'll be able to get RFK Jr. to address this, and maybe the American government can set a bit of a different tone, and maybe come to the conclusion that Pfizer lied and people died, and when they told us they had good studies, they had good results, and we believed them, we believed a lie, and for that, people need to go to jail. So that is the update. It's not what anybody wanted to see, but it's what many expected. That is Canada in a nutshell. If you like what I do, you know what to do. Like, share, subscribe, turn on notifications, drop a comment in the comment section below. Most importantly, share this story. And if you can help Dan Hartman out, go help him out. Now you know you vlog, people. Peace out. Booyah.
These agreements require employees of the Government of Canada that access these documents to sign confidentiality agreements. And why is that? Why is there much more redactions, as my colleague said, in these documents than in other documents? It's because these documents were signed at the beginning of a pandemic, when everybody was desperate for vaccines, when companies were being told to rush vaccine production, do testing in an unprecedented way, in a way they normally don't do it. So these companies were exposed to way higher liability, putting their products on the market than they normally would, because they didn't do the type of testing that normally takes these drugs years to come to market. They did it all in less than a year. So that's why these companies said, if I'm going to deliver you this product that I haven't tested in my normal way, I want to have different conditions. And with companies, all countries around the world competing with each other to get these, the countries had less leverage than they normally do. For example, if we were entering into flu vaccine contracts or monkeypox contracts or other things that were normally available, this would be a different issue. But these are already signed. They were signed at a time the government didn't have that leverage in negotiations. We just wanted to sign as many vaccine contracts with as many producers as possible because Canadians were desperate for vaccines. And in the end, it worked out. We got vaccines, and we were one of the countries that got to vaccinate everybody the fastest.